Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Angela T. Corpus, the first reporter for today's topic, Economics, Institutions, and Development. So, what is economic development? There's a lot of things that we can do to help strengthen our local economy and support our community. As a person, we most likely help fund economic development every time we purchase something at the store and pay local or state sales tax. That cup of coffee, those new shoes you bought, or the real estate taxes you may pay all usually have a percentage of the sales going towards economic development projects or initiatives. Economic development. Economic development is the creation of wealth from which community benefits are realized. It is more than a jobs program. It's an investment in growing your economy and enhancing the prosperity and quality of life for all residents. It is also a process in which overall education, well-being, health, income, and living standards of the general population improves. This is where the economy will gradually grow, change, and become advanced. Many times, these objectives include building or improving infrastructure such as roads, bridges, and others, improving our education system through new schools, enhancing our public safety through fire and police service, or incentivizing new businesses to open a location in a community. Aside from the objectives, there's a lot of opportunities of having an economic development, such as job skills training and career guidance, financial skills training, support for the access to assistance like social welfare benefits that might be available, programs that provide opportunities for income and others. In general, economic development is a process which people in a country become wealthier, healthier, better educated, and have a greater access to good quality housing. Economic development is very important. In order for any community to survive, its citizens must have employment opportunities and its government must be generate revenue to provide services.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Kristen May Delipe. Today, we will discuss the differences between economic growth and development. So first, we have GDP versus GPI. When we say GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product. It is a monetary measure of the market value of all the final goods and services produced in a specific time period by countries. So GDP measures the monetary value of final goods and services, that is, those that are bought by the final user, produced in a country in a given period of time, say for example a quarter or a year, and it counts all of the output generated within the borders of a country. So next we have GPI. GPI stands for Genuine Progress Indicator. It is a national level measure of economic growth and prosperity. GPI is an alternative metric to GDP but which accounts for externalities such as pollution. So GPI is considered to be a better measure of growth from the perspective of green or social economics. So here in the graph, it shows that from 1950 to 1980, economic growth was increasing GPI. But after the mid-1980s, the relationship broke down. So GDP per capita is a measure of economic growth. GPI takes into account the environment, healthcare, pollution, and education. And therefore, that can be used as a measure of economic development. So we also have here a graph of an economic growth in UK. Economic growth means an increase in real GDP, which means an increase in the value of national output or national expenditure. Economic growth is an important macroeconomic objective because it enables increased living standards, improved tax revenues, and helps to create new jobs. GDP is a measure of the national income or national output and national expenditure. So it basically measures the total volume of goods and services produced in an economy. Next is economic development. Development looks at a wider range of statistics than just GDP per capita. Development is concerned with how people are actually affected. So here it considers their real living standards as well as their freedom to enjoy a high quality of living. So we also have here the measures of economic development that we'll look at: real income per head, GDP per capita, levels of literacy and education standards, levels of healthcare, example nito ay number of doctors per 1,000 population, quality and availability of housing, levels of environmental standards, and life expectancy. So here we have absolute poverty. Absolute poverty is when household income is below a certain level, which makes it impossible for the person or family to meet basic needs of life including food, shelter, safe drinking water, education, healthcare, etc. So the question is, do people have sufficient resources to maintain a healthy diet and basics of life such as shelter? So economic growth may be essential to enable higher incomes for people to be able to buy more food. However, economic growth doesn't necessarily improve everyone's living standards. It does not always translate into higher living conditions for all. If the poorest people in society don't have the ability to take part in economic growth, it might not reach them. So there is a big question about how the benefits of economic growth are spread out in society. Next is educational standards. Educational standards define the knowledge and skills students should possess at critical points in their educational career. Economic growth may enable more money to be spent in education. However, even if the country grows, there is no guarantee that the money it makes will be used to improve education in the country. Sometimes there isn't any connection between GDP and how many people read. Next is environmental standards. Environmental standards are administrative regulations or civil law rules implemented for the treatment and maintenance of the environment. So usually these rules are set by the government. They can prohibit certain activities, set the frequency and method of monitoring, and require permits for the use of land or water. Economic growth can actually harm the environment and people's living standards. For example, higher output could cause more pollution. If higher growth involves cutting down forests, this could have adverse environmental consequences in long term. So the last one is transport infrastructures. Transport infrastructures are a major drive for achieving economic development at all geographical scales. So this is particularly at the regional and local level, at which the units of the spatial economic systems are usually configured. Infrastructure economic development would require improvements in infrastructure and transport. So this could be important for areas that might not be able to get to the main areas of growth in the economy. So next we will discuss the measures of economic development. Measuring economic development is not as precise as measuring GDP because it depends on what factors are included in the measure. There are several different measures of economic development, such as the Human Development Index or the HDI. The Human Development Index is a measure of economic development and economic welfare. So the Human Development Index examines three important criteria of economic development. These are life expectancy, education, and income levels. and uses this to create an overall score between 0 and 1. 1 indicates a high level of economic development, and 0 a very low level. The HDI combines first, life expectancy index, average life expectancy compared to a global expected life expectancy. Second, education index. Nandito yung mean years of schooling and expected years of schooling. And third, income index. So what does HDI shows? The HDI gives an overall measure of how well the economy is doing. It has some flaws and doesn't include a lot of things that should have been included, but it does give a rough idea of how people's economic well-being compares to other people's. So we also have here factors affecting economic growth in developing countries. The levels of infrastructure, example is transport and communication. Levels of corruption, what percentage of tax rates are actually collected and spent on public services. Educational standards and labor productivity. Basic levels of literacy and education can determine the productivity of the workforce. Levels of inward investment. For example, China has invested in many African countries to help export raw materials that its economy needs. Labor mobility. The flow of foreign aid and investment. Targeted aid can help improve infrastructure and living standards. Then last is level of savings and investment. Higher savings can fund more investment, helping economic growth. In summary, economic growth means an increase in real national income or national output. Economic development means an improvement in the quality of life and living standards. Example, measures of literacy, life expectancy, and healthcare. Ceteris paribus, we would expect economic growth to enable more economic development. Higher real GDP enables more to be spent on healthcare and education. However, the link is not guaranteed. The proceeds of economic growth could be wasted or retained by small wealthy elite.
New view about economic development. The new view about the development process suggests that one cannot capture the process of development by just capita income. It cannot reflect the multidimensional nature of development process. In recent years, a number of different types of measures have been developed to be better reflected the multidimensional nature of development process. In next few lectures, we will study extensively some of these new measures. We will see that these measures are much better than per capita income in reflecting the development process and quality of life. However, these are still evolving and should be taken as work in progress. Ang makabagong hakbang o pananaw sa economic development process daw ay hindi na ukol lang sa per capita income. Sa madaling salita, hindi na masosolusyonan o mapupunan lamang ang pagdevelop o pag-akyat ng isang ekonomiya. Ayos lang sa iisang basihan kagaya ng per capita income. Dahil sa multidimensional nature ng economic development process, ay di maaangkop ang anumang solusyon na ang basihan ay iisa lamang na aspekto nito at maging tunnel vision lamang kung saan anong naisip para makaangat ng ekonomiya sapagkat sa panahon ngayon, marami ng mga aspeto na pwedeng ayusin at i-improve para umangat ang isang ekonomiya o ukol sa economic development. Halimbawa nito ay tulungan ang mga main producers ng isang bansa gaya ng mga farmers para hindi tayo magkaroon ng shortage ng anumang produce dito sa Pilipinas at di na din mangangailangan bumili pa ng imported goods at dahil doon, magiging mas mura ang ibang mga bilihin, makakatulong sa maraming tao at sa overall economic development.
Economic growth without development. A country can experience economic growth without development. This will happen if gross domestic product increases, but there is no exact improvement seen in the country. And this could occur due to some possible reasons. Number 1, economic growth may only benefit a small percent of the population. For example, if a country produces more oil, it will see an increase in GDP. However, it is possible that this oil is only owned by one firm, and therefore, the average worker doesn't really benefit. Number 2 is corruption. Corruption is also a possible reason for economic growth without development. A country may see higher GDP, but the benefits of growth may be siphoned or transferred into the bank accounts of the politicians. Next is environmental problems. Producing toxic chemicals will lead to an increase in real GDP. However, without proper regulation, it can also lead to environmental and health problems. This is an example of where growth leads to a decline in living standards for many. Number 4 is congestion. Economic growth can cause an increase in congestion. This means people will spend longer in traffic jams. GDP may increase, but they have lower living standards because they spend more time in traffic jams. Production not consumed is also a possible reason. If a state-owned industry increases output, this is reflected in an increase in GDP. However, if the output is not used by anyone, then it causes no actual increase in living standards. Last is military spending. A country may increase GDP by spending more on military goods. However, if this is at the expense of healthcare and education, it can lead to lower living standards. There is need for widespread recognition of the fact that sustainability of economic growth does not depend merely on containing the fiscal deficit and inflation, or on energy security and foreign investment. Equally, it is contingent on social stability.
Three core values of development: sustenance, self-esteem, and freedom from servitude. Sustenance. This refers to the capacity to meet basic necessities such as food, clothing, and shelter. Lack of even one of these means that a person's life is not progressive. A country develops if its citizens have enough for their basic necessities. There is growth of income, extreme poverty is addressed, and there is equality among members of society. Next is the self-esteem. The quality of life is good when there is respect, trust, and self-value. Each person has needs which can be achieved through the presence of respect, dignity, and a good reputation in society. A person's worth as an individual cannot simply be measured by the ownership of material things, which is often given emphasis by progressive capitalist countries such as the United States. In the Philippines, material wealth is not the only important thing, but the love for one's family, the family's reputation, and a person's dignity and self-esteem. A country is developed if this unique need of the people is addressed. Last is the freedom of servitude. This freedom is drawn from liberation from oppressive system in society. Poverty and abuse, slavery, ignorance, and the absence of the freedom to choose one's culture or religion. This freedom can be seen in the range of choices in a society. What is good about development is not only the joy of being free from poverty, but also the availability of being a wide range of choices. In general, freedom prevails if people live a comfortable life, if they have the freedom to choose their religion, to vote, and to express their opinion about administration and governance, and if they enjoy equal opportunities for education and employment.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Hazel Fred Sidimapitan. So now let's talk about the three objectives of economic development. First, governments working on big economic objectives such as creating jobs or growing an economy. These initiatives can be accomplished through written laws and thus strict regulations and tax incentives or collections. So, every product has a tax attached because those taxes that the government deduct from those workers who have a large salaries, just like the products we buy, there's a tax on it. And that tax will be back to the government, then that will become the source of income of the government and make it used for the country's budget every year, which is also used to build infrastructure that can also give a job for people who will gonna build or work for the roads, schools, and other establishments. So it is called like a government cycle because people help the government to develop. Halimbawa, Halimbawa nito ay yung mga product at mga negosyanteng tao which is isa sa mga source or kinukuhanan ng tax ng government. At ito rin ay kanya ibabalik sa paraang pagpapatayo ng mga infrastructure. Second, programs that provide infrastructure and services such as bigger highways, community parks, new school programs and facilities, public libraries or swimming pools, new hospitals, and crime prevention initiatives. So this is what I am talking about earlier, that the tax that has been collected is what they are going to use in building or providing infrastructure like highways, community parks, new school, and etc. Third, job creation and business retention through workforce development programs to help people get the needed skills and education they need. This is also includes small business development programs that are geared to help entrepreneurs get financing or network with other small businesses. So, if all of the people have works, of course, our country will be more prosperous because when a person is unemployed, it will be difficult to support himself and his family. So that the government must provide a work for his people around the country or community, especially to those people na hindi nakapagtapos. Because developing and promoting more jobs for human beings is one thing that can help to grow our economy. Because when there are a lot of jobs, there are also a lot of projects to be accomplished that can also help people to survive from their hungriness. So, itong three objectives na ito, it was like a win-win system that the government needs the people and the people needs the government